Hi, my name is Cynthia Refutation, and I'm responding to Luis's claim of fact. And I'm disagreeing that Microsoft's software products are for server-side industry, they're inadequate, and will prove that Microsoft is in fact adequate. In response to his secondary claim, first of all, Microsoft is not as costly as the leading operating system. It has lower costs of ownership for certain workloads. In Journal Entry and Trade Journal and Information Week, they explained that Microsoft paid several consulting companies, Giga Information Group, Forrester's Research, and IDC among them, to test its thesis, and not surprisingly perhaps, the group analyst David Curley is of the opinion that recently Linux environments generally cost more than Windows environments when you factor in the necessary service and support. And more recently, he says the total cost of Windows and Linux are on par, and the variables of a particular usage scenario determining which costs less. So basically, Windows and the equivalent industry counterparts cost the same, so Windows and Linux are the same. Secondly, Microsoft is not time-consuming, and switching to Linux would be time-consuming and very costly at the same time. According to Network World Incorporated, John Fontana explains that 90% of the 300 large corporations with 10,000 plus end users that respond to the survey indicated that a significant or total switch from Windows to Linux would prohibitively is expensive, extremely complex, and time-consuming, and not provide any tangible business gains for the organization. Also, in South China Morning Post, a general interest periodical in China, it says that Gartner analysis said enterprises should not expect to save costs by switching from Windows to Linux, saying migrating PC desktops to Linux makes sense only in a narrow range of situations. Knowledge workers use PCs to run diverse combinations of desktops to Linux makes sense only in a narrow. In another article called PC World, it says if you're reasonably happy with Windows and can manage to work with the applications and hardware you already use, like already own and use, it probably isn't worth the trouble switch gears and learn an operating system from scratch. And many people don't know about Windows right now, so why switch to when you'll try to learn that. My response to the second claim that was made is that Microsoft is just as secure as any leading operating system. According to Network World, Linux provides business with excellent performance, reliability, ease of use, and security that is equivalent to Unix and Windows Server 2003. So Linux products are not as equally secure as Microsoft. Lastly, Linux is not an option that many are switching to from Microsoft. Referring back to PC World, they say that in the end, the type of Windows user who will want to take Linux for a test drive will probably be moderately experienced, curious, frustrated with some inflexible part of Windows. So these people who switch to Linux are only a few. Also, there are many flaws that Linux has that many don't really find that important to actually switch from Microsoft to Linux. In PC World, it says that some people switching to Linux might get confused because the options might be confusing to folks with less than an intermediate level of computer skill. So referring back to only a few will be able to use it or be able to want to switch. And also some products that connect to Microsoft are not able to connect to Linux. An example that in Linux, there are no drivers for Canon PowerShot 5200 camera and HP ScanJet 5470C scanner. And if the hardware maker doesn't have the driver you need, you will need to try the Linux driver foundry or a website that they give you. And if you need to use the product that has no Linux support, it will be a whole lot easier to use Windows. So according to PC World, overall, it would be easier to stick with Microsoft than to do this whole process in order to do a task that can be made in 1 or 2 steps with Microsoft. Thank you.
Applause, applause, applause. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, you labeled the advocate's proposition pretty clearly. The secondary claims got a little bit confusing because sometimes it sounds like you're making your claim, and sometimes it sounds like you're repeating what the advocate's claim was on these particular points. Most of your points, you do have pretty clear claims on them, and so they're easy to follow, and you've got excellent evidence supporting the position that you're taking. What I'm not getting is much contrast to what the advocate said on their point, and so how am I supposed to make an evaluation about the evidence or the reasoning that they used if I'm not hearing about what some of those arguments are? I'm mostly getting counterclaims on these points. And it sounds like the counterclaims are pretty viable, but remember one of the things that we talked about in using counterclaims as a response is that the counterclaims need to be mutually exclusive, and I'm not sure that they always are on some of your points. For instance, you on the very first point, you say, look, it comes down to it being, basically they are cost equivalent. And so was cost equivalency one of the factors that the advocate was looking at? If Linux in the Microsoft products are cost equivalent, then your whole argument at the end basically means that you're not going to save money because you'd have to do all this switch over, and so there's no marginal benefit from using the Linux systems instead. I don't remember if there was an argument about the security or reliability of those systems, and as a consequence, that may be where the dispute is on this particular point. The argument about switching over and the cost argument, you developed that really well. I mean, there's good evidence that suggests that, look, the vast majority of people who use this equipment, they use Microsoft-based systems, that it would, unless there was some particular reason, the turnover cost would be substantial, and so it really makes it an impractical thing for people to do those sorts of things. However, does that address the issue of somebody who is not committed to one system or the other and is making a choice as to what system to develop? And I'm not sure that you've addressed that particular issue. So if I'm a company and I'm saying, okay, I'm about to spend a huge amount of money to create an IT system for my company, which system should I go with? I'm fresh start, and I'm not sure that the advocate's arguments have been answered by the claims that you're presenting on this point. And I think that that's part of the problem that's going on here. And some of that is, of course, because we're not hearing the arguments at the same time. If I had just heard his arguments and you were giving it the response like we're going to be doing in the debate, then this would make a little bit more sense. But because you have to kind of recap what the advocate's claims are to some degree, it's not quite as clear what the point is. The security issue, I think you do kind of make an argument on, and I think there's some information on this. This is a little bit less developed than the other arguments that you've got. And I do think that you do present a good counterclaim that this is a policy argument that we were talking about, that in fact there are problems with Linux systems because of the drivers and those sorts of issues. I think that is a good hesitation. If the issue, as the advocate phrased it, was that it's it's inadequate in some way. Well, I think you can show, for instance, that Linux, of course, is inadequate in many ways as well, and I think that that's the way you want to phrase that claim. At the end you say, okay, if the standard is adequacy, each of them has their flaws, and the question then becomes, what is the issue that we should be deciding upon? And you want to come down on the conclusion the cost is the issue that we should come down on deciding upon, because that's where your argument's the strongest. All right, a little too much reading. You need to look at us and talk to us a little bit. I know it's a tech issue, and maybe, it's just as I got to talk and focus on the tech issues, but
it's so hard when it's still